Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this first working session at the Human Dimension Implementation Meeting 2014. I'm Nicola Schmidt and I'm the Deputy Head of the OSCE Election Department, and it's my pleasure to moderate this session this afternoon on democratic institutions. This afternoon we have the opportunity to discuss the implementation of OSCE commitments in three key areas: democracy at the national, regional and local levels, citizenship and political rights, and democratic elections. These three interrelating issues are a foundation of OSCE Human Dimension commitments. In the 1990 Charter of Paris, OSCE participating states committed to build, consolidate and strengthen democracy as the only system of government of our nations. And at Helsinki in 1992, participating states acknowledged the importance of considering democracy at the regional and local levels. Indeed, at all levels of governance, democracy in its true essence can only be achieved through the meaningful and inclusive participation of all citizens, including women, youth, and marginalized groups. This was recognized in the 1990 OSCE Copenhagen document, which explicitly refers to citizens taking part in the governing of their country, as well as a range of other documents, including the 1992 Helsinki document and the 1999 Charter for European Security, that also provide measures for the international protection of stateless persons. The participating states also recognize the importance of ensuring equal opportunities for men and women, for youth and marginalized groups, and of facilitating their political participation. The ability to exercise political rights is a key condition for effective participation in political life. This includes rights to freedoms of expression and peaceful assembly, as well as the right to vote. Within the OSCE, democratic elections are recognized as a cornerstone of democracy, and a range of OSCE commitments serve to safeguard the principle that the will of the people, freely expressed in periodic and genuine elections, constitutes the basis for the authority of the government. In all three of these areas, reporting by the OSCE demonstrates a number of commendable efforts by participating states to implement these commitments, while noting challenges that remain throughout the OSCE region in strengthening democratic institutions, including political parties and legislatures, to enhance political pluralism and inclusive democratic governance. I believe we all very much look forward to hearing from participating states and civil society on these important issues in more detail in this afternoon's session. It is now my pleasure to welcome the OSCE Director, Mr. Michael Georg Link, who will provide an introductory address on the theme of democratic institutions. I'd like to shortly introduce Mr. Link, not that it would be necessary, but just to give you a short background on him. Before he began his tenure as OD Director on 1st July of 2014, he served from January 2012 to December 2014 as the Minister of State for Europe in the German government. He was responsible for OSCE, European Union, Council of Europe and NATO affairs. He was elected to the German Parliament in 2005, representing Heilbronn from Baden-Württemberg, and served through 2013. During that term, from 2006 to 2013, Mr. Link established a strong OSCE connection as a member of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Mr. Link is also a past member of the boards of the Center for International Peace Operations, the CIF, the German Foundation for Peace Research, and the Foundation for German-Polish Cooperation. He remains active in international NGOs, including the German Council on Foreign Relations, the German Association for Eastern European Studies, the Southeast Europe Association, and the German Atlantic Association. He was born in Heilbronn, and he studied Russian, French, political science, public law, and Eastern European history at the University of Augsburg, the University of Lausanne, and the University of Heidelberg. Following the Director's address, we will proceed to contributions from the plenary. In this respect, please note that we have a speakers list which is located behind our table, and I would kindly ask anyone interested to speak to approach our colleagues there. Please also note that in the interest of a broad and open discussions, and since we already have 24 speakers on our speakers list, contributions in the sessions will be limited to 4 minutes each, and depending on the numbers of speakers, we may still have to shorten the speaking time. I now have the pleasure to pass the floor to Director Link, who will provide an introductory address on the theme of this afternoon's sessions, Democratic Institutions. Thank you very much, Director.
Thank you very much. Dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to Nicola Schmidt for the very nice introduction. She's deputy head of our electoral department, and together with many experts in ODIHR, she is carrying out what this organization, this institution, is standing for many years, meaning a work which is based on a sound methodology, which is neutral, which applies equal standards, and which especially, of course, has a mandate to defend, which I think is unique. In no other multilateral organization we can find something like that. Therefore, of course, my first word of thanks goes to the team in ODIHR, because I can only, of course, work when and if I can rely on a strong team. We, indeed, need that strong team, because the many commitments you, as participating states, were giving us, of course, require also a strong team, which is able, and I will speak about that, also to carry out the numerous, even unexpected tasks and jobs we have to do, let alone, of course, monitoring and observing elections in situations where they come completely novel or surprise, as in Ukraine, even twice this year, or maybe with partially also some sort of local elections coming up, of course, even 3 times. So part of our job, of course, is also be prepared for the unforeseeable. And in elections, of course, that can always happen. Therefore, we have also to prepare for that, and I'm especially thankful, therefore, also to Thomas Greminger, to the chairman in office, who very clearly, and I know it also from many conversations with Chairperson Burkhalter, also highlighted that this, of course, in the end, also includes of having a sound budget. But that is a different topic. Just let me underline that, because obviously is the case. Yes, it's my pleasure to open this working session for you from the side of the statements, with a specific focus on democracy, national, regional, local levels, and of course also democratic elections. Democracies in the OSCE region, in particular democratic institutions, continue to be challenged at national, regional, and local levels. At the 2010 OSCE summit in Astana, participating states agreed that respect for democracy, I quote, must be safeguarded and strengthened, end quote. Eurobarometer surveys show a decreasing level of trust in national parliaments from 57 to 31% in the last 5 years. Well, you might argue that has maybe in those countries who have the euro as their currency to do with that, but we can actually statistically observe it also way beyond these countries who have the euro as their currency. It is way beyond development, of course, what we clearly can see. 75 to 31, I think that's a quite worrying experience. Trust, therefore, in political parties in many participating states is also now below 15%. Transparency, openness, and accountability of democratic institutions therefore represent challenges that need to be urgently addressed. Supporting participating states in implementing OSCE commitments, and that is our job, of course, also in the area of political pluralism and multi-party democracy, constitutes an important part of our work in upholding democratic principles. Together with the Council of Europe's Venice Commission, I mentioned them already this morning, ODIHR has developed the 2010 guidelines on political party regulation. More is to come. Right now we are elaborating together guidelines on freedom of association. Challenges faced by political parties were highlighted at an expert seminar this year on political parties organized by ODIHR in Warsaw in July, which gathered members of parliaments, representatives of political party think tanks, and academics from over 20 participating states. Democratic institutions such as parliaments and political parties currently face significant challenges in relation to transparency, openness and accountability related to the meaningful and equal political participation in public life. Addressing the issue of representation is vital to uphold and promote democratic values as well as trust in political processes. ODIHR continues, therefore, to emphasize that public accountability of parliaments, in particular, are cornerstone principles underlying many OSCE commitments. We continue to engage with participating states on the issue of parliamentary ethics through consultations and seminars. In this regard, the OSCE ODIHR background study, Professional and Ethical Standards for Parliamentarians, represents an important tool. On 18 and 19 March 2014, parliamentarians and experts from Azerbaijan, Estonia, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, Sweden, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom met to discuss professional and ethical standards for parliamentarians, as well as the benefits of and challenges in developing codes of conduct at a workshop organized by ODIHR in Warsaw. Again, this is not about relativizing the mandates of freely elected parliamentarians. It is about how can we together increase the values of code of conduct and accountability together, because obviously, as I quoted the numbers, there is a decrease in public trust. Parliaments also need to increasingly engage with civil society. This may well contribute to parliamentary openness, which was discussed at a side event organized by ODIHR just before this working session over lunch. Public participation in political life is essential to upholding and promoting democratic values as well as trust in democratic institutions. This is true for all parts of society, but in particular for underrepresented groups such as youth, women, gender issues, and Roma. Youth often feel that their views are increasingly disregarded, thus they are not equally heard and participate in public life. And in gender, political participation in gender issues, there ODIHR has a particularly important knowledge to contribute. The Charter of Paris of 1990, participating states committed to, quote, build, consolidate, and strengthen democracy as the only system of government of our nations, end of quote. ODIHR therefore encourages all participating states to increase the openness and accountability of democratic institutions. In particular, the conduct of democratic elections, and this will be now my main part also to speak with you now, is where I want to elaborate a little bit, remains an essential component of viable and pluralistic democratic institutions. Participating states have also agreed on specific commitments directly related to the conduct of genuine and democratic elections. To support the realization of these commitments, in 2014, ODIHR has already deployed election-related activities to numerous participating states, including Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, Moldova, Serbia, Turkey, and Ukraine, as well as an election support team to Afghanistan mandated by the Permanent Council. This breadth of deployment demonstrates ODIHR's continuing capacity to manage observation activities in diverse and at times very complex political and security environments. Regrettably, and I underline that, regrettably, OSCE budget constraints earlier this year meant that while operational ready, ODIHR was unable to deploy further election-related activities to Belgium, Georgia, Lithuania, Sweden, and the United States, as well further activities later in the end of this year are under threat of cancellation due to insufficient budgetary means. But let me make one thing very clear. Of course, this will not affect the Ukrainian or Moldovan elections. We will try to do everything possible, including, of course, very, very severe changes in our internal budget and cuts in order to make sure that sufficient funds will be there, of course, for monitoring the Ukrainian and Moldovan elections. Nevertheless, the situation is serious because of structural underfunding of ODIHR and additionally of a very, very extreme amount of money we had to spend for the two now Ukrainian elections we are facing a situation where we can monitor less elections than we would like to monitor. I would like to bring this to the attention of the participating states, and this clearly, of course, needs to be addressed. We need to speak and the appropriate fora about that, because let's take another example. We would have liked to observe also parliamentary elections to the European Parliament. We had invitations by numerous participating states to observe them and could not do it because just there is a serious lack of funds, which puts us in the situation that very often where we would like to go, we cannot go. And I think this is something, of course, what should not happen. Nevertheless, we are trying right now, and I say it again, to do everything that Ukraine will be duly monitored. This is already, of course, underway, and the same, of course, then later on November 30th with Moldova. ODIHR's refined approach to election observation remains grounded in independence, impartiality, and professionalism, and based on a long-term and needs-based methodology. This approach has been further enhanced this past year through the publication of a comprehensive review of electoral legislation and practices in OSCE participating states, and will shortly include upcoming handbooks on observing campaign finance and participation of national minorities in elections. Overall, ODIHR's methodology continues to provide a solid basis to comprehensively assess electoral processes for which participating states have repeatedly noted their appreciation and support. It is also a model for other key international organizations engaged in election observation, especially in the framework of the 2005 Declaration of Principle for International Election Observation, endorsed under United Nations auspices, now by more than 47 organizations worldwide. I could even add the cooperation with the Council of Europe, European Parliament, etc., and other organizations. To address the continued shortfall in the numbers of seconded observers, another problem, ODIHR has established a separate extra budgetary elections observation sustainability fund to bridge the gap between the numbers of requested and seconded observers by directly recruiting additional observers. This new fund supplements the secondment process, which remains the primary mechanism to recruit observers. For ODIHR, an emphasis on follow-up activities is vital as our involvement extends after an election. The cycle of engagement with participating states strives for constructive post-electoral engagement and follow-up leading to an enhanced conduct of elections. This is done comprehensively among ODIHR's various thematic departments. So far, in 2014, a number of participating states have shown political efforts to engage in discussions on ODIHR's recommendations, including Georgia, Iceland, Montenegro, Norway, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Ukraine, as well as the newest OSCE participating state, Mongolia. In some cases, collaboration with a range of domestic and international stakeholders during follow-up activities has promoted a coordinated approach to electoral improvement. Beyond participating states, leading follow-up OSCE institutions, in particular the Human Dimension Committee, serve an increasingly important role to institutionalize and exhibit examples of good practice. It is worth noting the crucial role played by citizen observers and the need for their organizations to be able to undertake election-related activities freely and without constraint, including having explicit legal provisions to conduct election observation without fear of retribution. With having conducted some 320 election-related activities, ODIHR is well positioned and remains ready to support participating states in their efforts to bring electoral processes in line with the commitments to further strengthen democratic frameworks. I thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to a good and fruitful discussion, and please don't hesitate to raise whatever questions you would like to be risen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Link. Thank you for this introduction to our afternoon session. During your speech, we had 3 more speakers added to the list, so our speakers list is now with 27 speakers. Please, if anyone else would like to take the floor, please remember to sign up with our colleagues behind the head table. In the interest of of a broad and open discussion. As I said before, we would like to limit the contribution time to 4 minutes for each speaker, and I kindly ask you to stick to that time so that everyone has a chance to speak. If you have any prepared statements, please, they can be distributed through our distribution system. So we would ask you to limit your comments not to reading prepared statements, but to other comments and contributions to the discussion. The first speaker on the list is the Institute for Democracy and Human Rights, and it will be followed by the Commonwealth of Independent States Elections Monitoring Organization. The Institute for Democracy and Human Rights has the floor.
Thank you, Mrs. Moderator. It's my great honor and privilege to address you on behalf of Institute for Democracy and Human Rights, the organizations that I represent here. I do believe that discussions and exchange of views that we will make today will also contribute to have more democratic Europe. In my speech, I would like to focus on the state of democracy and human rights that experienced in South Caucasus. South Caucasus countries such as Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia were under the control of Soviet Union until past 90 years, and this very reason undermined democratic development in these countries. I would like firstly start with Armenia, as democratic values have been crushed and fundamental freedoms and rights have been violated in this country for a long period of time. Armenia is the most politicized country, not only the region but in the world. Politics is absorbed in all spheres of life, in taxation, judicial system, and mass media. These aspects of life are controlled by the guidance of political will that the government pursues. Based on the provided information, the conclusion I reach is that the situation in Armenia is more deteriorated. Local citizens still live under the severe conducted or political system shaped during the Soviet period. They were made to recognize dictatorship of the centralized authority, which is headed by a group of people. The constant discussions we conduct with our Armenian colleagues once again indicates that struggle in favor of democratic values is going on in capital city of Armenia, in Yerevan. With regard to regions, the situation is unbearable, and people who reside in these regions lack an opportunity to fight for their fundamental rights. If we put it figuratively, thanks to the activities carried out by NGOs, democracy remained alive in Yerevan. Due to the endeavors made by these NGOs, Armenian society still relies on democracy, and today all of the ordinary people in Armenia need our support. We should save them from Sarkisian regime. Taking this opportunity, I want to address to the Armenian delegate who also participate in this meeting. Why your government deceives Europe? Why Sarkisian regime tries to create artificial democracy for visual purposes? In fact, it's nothing but remnants of Soviet dictatorship. Why the official government continues its repression policy towards its citizens? Because of these very repressions, hundreds of thousands of ordinary citizens move from Armenia to other countries. It has to be noted that consequences will be devastating for Armenia, and as a result, demographic misbalance will emerge in the region. Armenia is like a company centralized in the hand of one oligarch, and this oligarch is Serge Sarkisian. He views Armenia as the subject of trade, and he already sold it out to other countries. If we have a look at the closest history of Armenia compared with the situation we have today, things were more encouraged until 2008. It was in 2008 that Sarkisian took the office as a president and fully seized the control over the country's growing economy. In this way, he established family or clan-based economy. Failing to have support from the society, Sarkisian government started to look for support from outside of the country and put Yerevan, also Nagorno-Karabakh, which is currently under occupation, into auction. Frequently violated ceasefire regime in the front of line of Nagorno-Karabakh is an effort of Sarkisian government that calculated to calm down Armenian society. So without having stability and security in the region, it's meaningless to talk about human rights. It's no coincidence that the European Union calls on ensuring democracy in the South Caucasus and peaceful resolution of the conflict. In order to have peaceful resolution, we should abide to the neighborhood policy implemented by the European Union. However, Armenian government disregards that policy and do not demonstrate constructive position. As it's widely known, healthy competition of political forces is illustrated during the election. Let's have a look on the elections that Armenia had till today, how democratic values are observed in... Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for that contribution. The next speaker on the list is the Commonwealth of Independent States Elections Monitoring Organization, followed by the International Public Fund Russian Peace Foundation. Commonwealth of Independent States Elections Monitoring Organizations, you have the floor.
Thank you. I will speak Russian. Подготовка к досрочным парламентским выборам на Украине проходит в сложной обстановке. Среди основных проблем в проведении избирательной кампании следует назвать политический кризис в ряде регионов Восточной Украины, беженцев, применение административного ресурса, рост националистических настроений и попытки запрета политических партий. В связи со сложной обстановкой в регионах Восточной Украины, Донецкой и Луганской области, вероятно, не будут голосовать. Из-за проведения антитеррористической операции невозможно организовать проведение выборов в Донбассе должным образом. Из этого следует, что эти регионы фактически не получат своего представительства в парламенте. Очевидно, что через какое-то время этот факт, что Донбасс не голосовал и не получил представительства, станет почвой для второй, еще более сильной волны сепаратизма. И у этого сепаратизма будет серьезное экономическое обоснование. Почему эти регионы должны платить налоги в центр, не имея представительства в парламенте? Вероятно, что власти Украины сейчас считают, что можно провести выборы и без Донбасса, потому что все равно по Конституции у них будет 2/3 депутатов, и поэтому эти выборы будут легитимны. Но это не так. Это будут легальные, но не легитимные выборы. Необходимо понять, что если они пройдут в таком виде, они дадут серьезную почву для еще больших политических проблем. Большое количество беженцев из Донбасса могут стать почвой для фальсификации на выборах. Представьте себе, что в некоторых округах вдруг за неделю перед выборами появится на 10% больше людей, которые вдруг получат прописку, временную, но все-таки прописку в этом округе. Как быть с этими людьми? Как быть с этим явлением? На основании такой вот прописки, используя эти миграционные процессы, можно делать абсолютно невероятные цифры. Кроме того, существует информация, что многие кандидаты, которые баллотируются по мажоритарным округам, сталкиваются с тем, что у них интересуется, согласованы или не согласованы они наверху. И если не согласованы, то нет никаких гарантий, что они смогут попасть на встречи с избирателями в школах, в больницах и так далее. Ввиду этого сложно говорить о том, что применение административного ресурса стало меньше, чем было, например, при Януковиче. Ультранационалистические партии «Свобода» и «Правый сектор» показали свою нежизнеспособность на прошлых президентских выборах. Однако лидер популистской радикальной партии Олег Ляшко оказался более убедительным и более востребованным, успешно перехватив у них националистическую повестку. На Украине воинственный национализм уступил место воинственному популизму. Социологические опросы показывают, что радикальная партия может занять второе место, имея рейтинг около 14%. Кроме того, «Свобода» все равно сохраняет шансы пройти в парламент, балансируя на грани проходного барьера. Следует отметить, что на прошлых парламентских выборах во всех опросах она также балансировала на грани барьера, но в итоге набрала более 10% голосов. В начале мая 2014 года исполняющий обязанности главы государства Александр Турчинов попросил Минюст Украины проверить деятельность Компартии на предмет законности и заявил о возможности ее запрета в судебном порядке. К 14 июня глава Службы безопасности Украины Валентин Наливайченко предоставил Министерству юстиции Украины документы о запрете партии. 8 июля Министерство юстиции Украины и Государственная регистрационная служба обратились в суд с прошением о рассмотрении запрета деятельности на территории Украины коммунистической партии. Ряд членов КПУ, в том числе депутатов Верховной Рады, обвинены в финансировании и пособничестве террористам и сепаратистам из ДНР и ЛНР. Тем не менее, ЦИК Украины 15 сентября все-таки зарегистрировал КПУ на внеочередные парламентские выборы. Однако избирательная кампания сопровождается массированной атакой на КПУ как со стороны СМИ, так и со стороны власти. Ввиду этого сложно говорить о том, что избирательная кампания проходит в спокойной атмосфере. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. And thank you for sticking to the agreed time frame. The next speaker on the speakers list is the International Public Fund Russian Peace Foundation, followed by the United Kingdom on behalf of the European Union. International Public Fund Russian Peace Foundation, you have the floor.
Спасибо, госпожа председатель. Многие уже отмечали, что мир столкнулся с новыми вызовами, и они не могут не влиять на ситуацию с правами человека. В этой сфере нужны новые подходы, чтобы остановить деградацию того позитива, какого удалось добиться. Но когда начинается серьезная работа, научное мышление делает актуальной историю вопроса, о чем говорил профессор Эдвард, представитель США. И этот процесс уже начался. 10 дней назад в Женеве на 27-й сессии СПЧ ООН на пленарном заседании выступил министр иностранных дел. Кого бы вы думали, какого государства или чего? Это выступил министр королевства Гавайи. Он напомнил миру, что королевство Гавайи считает себя страной, которую грубой военной силой оккупировали США, без всяких демократических процедур типа референдумов, ввели войска и оккупировали. Министр заявил, что права его коренного народа нарушены оккупационным режимом и существует много обстоятельств, которые в близком будущем могут вывести этот вопрос в топ мировых новостей. Министр напомнил, что уроженец Гонолулу Обама хорошо осведомлен о событиях на Гавайях и призвал его не забывать уроки истории. Завершая, напомню старую как мир истину. Когда кто-то начинает выбивать пыль с пиджака соседа, он должен помнить, что эта пыль прежде всего осядет на его собственный пиджак. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you. The next speaker is the United Kingdom on behalf of the European Union, followed by the United States of America. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I have the honour to speak on behalf of the European Union. The following statement is also on behalf of Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Norway and San Marino. Please note that this list of aligned states is not yet final. The full list will be provided on the written version of this statement. Madam Moderator, the European Union is delighted that the recently appointed Director, Mikhail Link, has addressed this opening working session on democratic institutions. This is an essential aspect of ODIHR's activities, including through assisting participating states to be more responsive, accountable and representative, not least through its internationally respected election observation activity. Our recommendations to participating states in relation to this session are: 1. Ensure the enjoyment of fundamental freedoms of expression, opinion, peaceful assembly and association as essential means of supporting and enabling democratic governance. 2. Ensure freedom of the media in the interests of allowing for an equal playing field for campaigning for all candidates and as a means of providing access to proper information for voters. 3. Adopt a non-discriminatory and inclusive approach towards democratic participation by supporting the involvement of underrepresented groups and by advancing women's political participation. 4. Foster an environment where independent civil society can freely contribute to the strengthening of democratic governance. 5. Extend early and unrestricted invitations to ODIHR to observe their elections in line with OSCE commitments. 6. Make full use of the reports and recommendation of ODIHR election observation missions in an effort to ensure full compliance with their OSCE election-related commitments. 7. Constructively engage with ODIHR on follow-up activities to election observation mission reports, including by making voluntary updates to the OSCE Human Dimension Committee. Madam Moderator, the last year has been one of highs and lows for democracy in the OSCE region, perhaps best highlighted by events in Ukraine. We saw the authorities successfully hold a presidential election characterized by an impressively high turnout, despite the hostile security environment created by illegal armed groups in 2 eastern regions. We commend ODIHR for its outstanding election observation work in Ukraine, despite the security challenges. While celebrating the holding of these elections, we regret that some sections of the electorate were prevented from voting, both by instability in the east and by the illegal occupation and annexation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, brought about by a sham referendum. Elsewhere, we have seen presidential elections characterized by serious shortcomings in the observance of fundamental freedoms in Azerbaijan, and presidential elections that failed to offer a genuine choice in Tajikistan. We have seen efficiently administered and transparent elections in Georgia, although they were negatively impacted by allegations of political pressure on the main opposition party. We have also followed with interest the observation of election processes in some EU member states. In noting these developments, we acknowledge that no participating state has a perfect record and that EU member states too must make improvements to ensure full compliance with OSCE election commitments. We take this opportunity to reiterate our unequivocal support for ODIHR's independent, impartial and professional election observation methodology, which is widely seen as a flagship activity of the OSCE and serves as a model for other organisations, including the European Union. In closing, we note with concern that beyond the holding of elections, democratic space is being consistently restricted in some participating states. The suppression of the activities of civil society, including the imprisonment of human rights defenders, violations of free expression and free media commitments, as well as restrictions on the exercise of the freedoms of peaceful assembly and association, all undermine democratic principles. Participating states should promote and protect these freedoms to allow for genuinely participatory democracies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for the recommendations made. I would like to remind that recommendations as well as other statements can be circulated electronically through our distribution desk, which is outside. The next speaker on the list is the United States of America, followed by the Russian Public Institute of Electoral Law. United States of America, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, moderator. Again, I will summarize our statement and we'll distribute it. We want basically to offer our very strong support for the OSCE's Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, ODIHR, and the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly for their unwavering dedication to an essential component of OSCE's support for democracy, which is election observation. ODIHR represents the gold standard, and I can say this with some degree of expertise on this, since I was once the president of the National Democratic Institute, which also worked in this area. And the checklists, the guidance, the rules, basically the respect for local election laws and keeping countries to their own obligations is what is so important about this election observation. Now, there are some election laws that may not pass the litmus test for good elections, and those laws will be criticized, but for the most part, ODIHR is observing elections in accordance with the local laws. And I think, therefore, every country that is a member of the OSCE ought to welcome ODIHR observation. I was in Ukraine for the election in May, and I was very, very impressed by the some 800 or 900 observers from ODIHR, observers from the European Union, observers from the United States. There can be no question about the legitimacy of that election. Unfortunately, we obviously are not able to go to the eastern oblasts of Luhansk and Luhansk for reasons that related to the violence that was going on there and the separatists who refused to allow the elections to take place there. But there was still an extraordinary turnout of people who wanted to establish the legitimacy of the new presidency in Ukraine, the legitimacy of their government, and they did it to the satisfaction of all of the observers that were there. We're very disappointed that the Russian Federation did not use its influence to forestall the illegal referenda that were held in Crimea in March and in the oblasts in May of the eastern provinces. We reiterate that we do not recognize the legitimacy of the so-called regional and local elections held in Crimea on September 14, and we will not acknowledge their outcome. Our position, the United States position on Crimea, is very clear. The peninsula remains and an integral part of Ukraine. As for the Russian Federation itself, we regret that in the regional and local elections this month, the candidate registration process was used to squeeze out opposition candidates from running. With respect to Kosovo, again, we regret that they're not here, but the United States commends Kosovo for holding local elections in late 2013 and parliamentary elections in June. We appreciate very much the commitment of both the governments of Kosovo and Serbia to encourage voter participation. In Tajikistan, we agree with the OSCE observation mission's assessment that the November 2013 presidential election took place peacefully, but restrictive candidate registration requirements resulted in a lack of genuine choice and meaningful pluralism. We welcome the invitation from Turkmenistan that resulted in an OSCE election assessment mission for the December 2013 parliamentary election, and for the first time a final report assessing the electoral process. We agree with the report's findings that the elections took place in a strictly controlled political environment characterized by a lack of respect for fundamental freedoms that are central to democratic elections. And we strongly urge Turkmenistan to work with ODIHR to improve the climate and framework for the conduct of elections. In Macedonia's presidential and parliamentary elections in April, the campaign period was overshadowed by numerous and persistent allegations from across the country of biased media coverage that was largely in favor of one ruling party and its presidential candidate. In Hungary, 25 years after the historic transition from a one-party state, it's particularly striking that OSCE election observers concluded in their report on the April 2014 elections that, quote, the main governing party enjoyed undue advantage because of restrictive campaign regulations, biased media coverage, and campaign activities that blurred the separation between political party and the state. And as someone who worked in the early days of 1990 with Fidesz and with the other parties, it's really surprising to see what has happened in that country, and we cannot help but be disappointed. We note that the candidates in Turkey's first direct popular election of its president were generally able to campaign freely, and that the freedoms of association and peaceful assembly were respected. However, the OSCE ODIHR final report noted that the Prime Minister's use of his official resources and biased media coverage gave him a distinct advantage over other candidates. We thank ODIHR and the OSCE PA for their expert efforts to ensure that election-related commitments are met by offering recommendations to improve the electoral process in the participating states. We support ODIHR's outreach to local election officials in our country, in the United States. We will continue to support observation of United States elections and to carefully consider ODIHR's recommendations regarding electoral processes in the United States. And if I could speak personally, I absolutely agree with some of their criticisms of our electoral process, but I'm speaking personally now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is the Russian Public Institute of Electoral Law, followed by the Czech Republic. Russian Public Institute of Electoral Law, you have the floor.
Большое спасибо, уважаемые участники совещания. Как известно, ОБСЕ является основным инструментом раннего предупреждения о конфликтах и их предотвращения. Наша делегация сегодня ночью прилетела из Лондона, за что отдельное спасибо официальным властям Великобритании за возможность присутствовать и наблюдать за референдумом в Шотландии. Хочу поделиться своими наблюдениями и показать, какие вызовы угрожают сегодня демократическим процессам. Сегодня, сосредоточившись на выборах, ОБСЕ исключила из поля своего зрения такой важный элемент гуманитарной корзины, неразрывно связанные с политическими правами и свободами, это прямое волеизъявление граждан, то есть референдум. Отсутствие какого-либо критерия ОБСЕ по вопросам прямого участия граждан в управлении государством и непосредственном принятии решений фактически начало процесс удаления от сотрудничества и диалога и ведет не только к конструктивной поляризации внутри региона ОБСЕ, но и обострения напряженности во всем мире. Даже яркие консерваторы сегодня признают, что мир меняется, и закрепленный в Хельсинском заключительном акте ОБСЕ 1975 года принцип нерушимости границ, оставаясь главенствующим, вынужден трансформироваться под давлением современных реалий. Право нации на самоопределение реализуется различным путем, в том числе и с использованием вооруженных сил уже после принятия Хельсинского акта 1975 года. Например, в 1983 год была провозглашена Турецкая республика Северный Кипр после высадки военного десанта. Косово, 1999 год, после кровопролитной войны с задействием войск НАТО и ковровых бомбардировок. 2008 год, вооруженное вторжение грузинских войск на территорию Южной Осетии обусловило признание Южной Осетии и Абхазии. Но есть и позитивные, мирные примеры реализации права народов на самоопределение. Так, 16 марта 2014 года прошел референдум в Крыму, и более 96% крымчан высказалось за состав России. 18 сентября 2014 года прошел референдум в Шотландии о независимости от Великобритании. Опять же, жители Великобритании подтвердили, что остаются в составе, жители Шотландии подтвердили, что остаются в составе Великобритании. Главный итог этого референдума. Великобритания четко указала, что вопросы самоопределения можно и нужно решать мирно, без военного присутствия, путем проведения референдумов. Но при этом отступление от демократических стандартов организации электоральных процедур не способствовало снятию напряженности в регионе. Я только сожалею, что там не присутствовала миссия БДИЧ ОБСЕ, потому что ряд отклонений от общепризнанных международных принципов наша делегация отмечала. И если бы такие отклонения были в одном из государств, Содружества независимых государств, мы бы получили отрицательные, негативные оценки от БДИЧ ОБСЕ. Свои замечания и предложения мы, естественно, направим в избирательные органы Великобритании. Но почему молчит БДИЧ ОБСЕ? Опять же, как мы понимаем, готовит очередную миссию в государство, конкретно в Украину, где происходит внутренний вооруженный конфликт и не откликается на проведение мирных процедур. Я считаю, что альтернативы мирного признания права нации на самоопределение сегодня не существует, о чем свидетельствуют проведенные референдумы в Шотландии и в Крыму. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you. I'd like to remind the topic of this discussion goes beyond elections as well. We also have in the session the topics of democracy at the national, regional, local levels, as well as citizenship and political rights and democratic elections. I'd encourage statements from participants on all three topics. The next speaker on the speakers list is the Czech Republic, followed by the Russian Federation. Czech Republic, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Czech Republic, of course, aligns herself with the intervention delivered by the United Kingdom on behalf of the European Union. Additionally, the Czech Republic would like to congratulate Mr. Link on his appointment as ODIHR Director, and we wish him best of luck and a lot of success in the lead of the ODIHR. We perceive the ODIHR as an outstanding institution with a great responsibility for the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms and promotion of democratization processes. This applies especially today, as the recent events are demonstrating a persistent necessity of such an institution with an utmost task to assist the states with their democratic advancement and with meeting their human rights commitments. The Czech Republic appreciates the high professional standards and expertise of the ODIHR. For due mandate performance, the ODIHR's autonomy is absolutely necessary in order for it to be able to effectively assist participating states in the implementation of the OSCE human dimension commitments. I would also like to stress that financial independence is as crucial as political autonomy, and in this regard, ODIHR has the full support of the Czech Republic. We wish to draw your attention to one topic in particular, which is equal political participation. That has been one of the long-term